Hello, this is Chicago School PsyD MFT dissertation video number 2, the purposes and philosophy and history of why this is exciting. So this is a most solemn and yet exciting topic, and I'm sure that when you saw the title of this video, you could hardly wait to see it, and I could hardly wait to make it for you. So I hope you will enjoy it, and I hope you will actually be inspired by it. But I recognize that part of the problem is that when you first think of dissertation, you think of those late night term papers. I remember when I was a student at the University of Utah, fortunately I was an early Mac user and nobody wanted to use the Macs. I don't understand why they were all lined up waiting for this little black screen with green text, and I was looking at this beautiful Windows interface. So I didn't have to wait for a computer, but I remember many finals weeks getting to school 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, and sitting there typing for 12, 13 hours until the library closed every day, writing term papers for my psychology classes. I did not care for that. In retrospect, I really enjoyed the process of writing and learning, but let's face it, term papers get pushed to the end and they end up being a very big headache. Well, you may think of the dissertation as a gigantic headache waiting for you at the end of 3 years instruction instead of at the end of one semester. You also might think of it as some gigantic hoop-shaped black hole that you've been asked to go in, and it's not clear to you whether you will ever emerge. Well, we're going to change all that, because part of the reason you feel that way about dissertation research is based on how we have come to view research in the field of psychotherapy and marriage and family therapy. And part of that has driven how we've designed the dissertation process here at the Chicago School and in the MFT program in particular. So speaking a little bit historically, in the early days of psychotherapy, those scholars and scientists who were interested in studying the process of psychotherapy did so largely through qualitative case studies in which a clinician would present a case and describe its features and the history and the etiology and the course of treatment and the outcomes observed. And while these could be rigorous from a scholarly perspective, they did not provide the type of scientific rigor that later became heralded as being critical. During the aftermath of World War II, there were too many returning vets with mental health needs to be satisfied by the current establishment of mental health providers, which was largely confined to psychiatrists at the time. And so the federal government needed a way to treat all these veterans. And so they turned to other professions, psychology, social work being the prominent two, and saying, can you people help with this? And they began licensing psychologists and social workers to provide clinical work in the subsequent years. And why that's important is because the federal government was sort of the first large-scale investor in mental health treatment in some ways. And then during the 50s and 60s, when we underwent a renaissance of the perfect society where the federal government was going to solve all our problems and they were going to pour all this money into everything, but at the same time, the field of evaluation research was born and was saying, but shouldn't we know if this stuff works before we keep spending money on it? And at a policy level, the intersection with Fisher's development of the analysis of variance provided, as well as the developments of certain key figures in the early evaluation field, they decided, we need a method for testing whether these social interventions are working at a large scale level and whether federal policy ought to continue to pay for them. And what that led to was the development of grouped statistical designs as the preferred way to test the effectiveness of psychotherapy. And I will say that as a tool for evaluating the policy relevance and policy value of a particular set of interventions, the randomized control trial is the gold standard. However, the shift that occurred at that time was that psychology programs began training exclusively in group designs. Why? Because it takes a lot of time to learn how to do group statistical designs. In fact, my doctoral degree is in research and evaluation methodology. That's all I studied, was methods for studying the effectiveness of psychotherapy. And the downside is that that's so difficult to learn that became all psychologists can learn. So at the same time, the development of the scientist practitioner model, scientifically minded psychotherapists were led to believe that the only way for them to truly be scientific was to conduct research and to be a true contributor to the science. But the problem was that the science, as it was taught to them, relied wholly on group statistical designs. And this placed case studies, qualitative analysis, and single case designs at this sort of different echelon of quality, to the point where in current times, there is not a lot of emphasis on how to conduct such group designs or such single case designs. And so I think what this has led to is a sort of complacency among therapists that research is too hard, we can't really do it, we really want to be clinicians anyway, so leave us alone and let us go do that. And the downside of that is that we've kind of thrown out the baby with the bathwater. So the purpose of the PsyD MFT dissertation process is to help sort of re-enliven the underlying processes of doing research, which clinicians still do, even if they don't do a big fat randomized controlled trial and a bunch of regression analyses or analyses of treatment effects. Regardless of whether we do that type of research or not, clinicians are in a position where you are constantly doing research. You're constantly formulating questions, hypotheses, collecting information to shed light on those hypotheses, and you're constantly trying to find answers to questions. And those answers become recorded in your brain, in your clinical intuition center, and are available to you at later dates. Unfortunately, that process tends to be informal and somewhat haphazard because it's very complicated to keep all of that straight. Not only are you a fact finder and a sense maker and a researcher in your clinical work, but also in your agency and organizational work. When it comes to writing a grant, when it comes to developing a new program or a new intervention or new curriculum for a particular problem or population that you're working with, you're constantly involved in a creative process, but because you don't typically think of yourself as a researcher, and because you don't have training or interest in group statistical designs, I suspect you find yourself without a great deal of enthusiasm for the idea of doing research, and yet you're doing research all the time. If you're writing a grant, you are trying to figure out what's the most innovative thing that's out there that you're doing, and you're trying to design something even better, and you're proposing to do that. When you're developing new curriculum, you have beliefs about the logic model underlying your change efforts or your change model. What do I think needs to happen for these kids to stop bullying each other, or for these premarital couples to learn the skills they need to learn in order to form a lifelong, mutually happy relationship. You're asking yourself these questions all the time. And so what we tried to do with the dissertation project was give you an opportunity to see this as a project, not a paper, not a gigantic hoop to jump through when you're done, but rather as an outgrowth of your day-to-day work, an outgrowth of the things you're already interested in, you're already excited about, you're already an expert or becoming an expert in, and the day-to-day concerns of exactly what's going on in your practice and the questions you have, the which, if answered, would advance you forward in your field. And so we hope that you'll see this dissertation process as mapping onto your current direct experience in the field. And you'll be able to design a project that will have an outcome for you that's real. And so in the next two videos, we are first going to talk about the nuts and bolts about a specific practices you can engage in between now and when you start your dissertation course sequence that can help you to make this project come alive for you and to grow out of your lived experience and become personally relevant and meaningful to you. And then we will also talk about some specific actions and specific options that exist for you in terms of how to formulate the project in the fourth video. And in the fifth video, we'll kind of talk about where we're going now and and how you're going to get there. So I hope you'll enjoy these videos. I apologize that I'm not an actor or a movie maker, but I hope you'll enjoy and benefit from the journey that we take together. Thank you.